In this episode, we are starting with a part of cybersecurity that often sounds dramatic, but becomes much easier to understand once you break it into simple ideas. Advanced Persistent Threats, APTS, and zero-day exploits are often described as if they are mysterious superweapons. Yet at their core, they are really about patience, planning, and taking advantage of weaknesses before defenders are ready. For someone studying for the CISA Certified Information Systems Auditor, CISA, certification, this topic matters because it shows why security controls, monitoring, and governance have to work together instead of standing alone. It also reminds us that some of the most serious attacks do not happen because a company ignored security completely, but because skilled attackers found a small opening, stayed quiet, and moved carefully through systems over time. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to begin is by separating the two ideas in the title because people often blend them together. An APT is not just one piece of malware, one bad actor, or one single event on a certain day. It is usually a long-running attack campaign carried out by a capable group that has a clear goal, such as stealing data, gathering intelligence, disrupting operations, or maintaining access inside an environment for as long as possible. The word advanced does not simply mean fancy code, because it can also refer to smart planning, custom techniques, good operational security, and the ability to adapt when defenders respond. The word persistent matters just as much, because these attackers are usually willing to spend weeks or months moving slowly, avoiding attention, and returning again if they are removed. Zero-day exploits are different, even though they can be used inside an APT campaign. A zero-day exploit takes advantage of a software weakness that is unknown to the defender, unknown to the vendor, or at least unpatched by the target when the attack begins. The phrase zero-day points to the idea that the defender has had 0 days to prepare a fix once the weakness becomes actively exploited. That makes these exploits especially dangerous because many common defensive steps depend on known signatures, known patterns, and available patches. A 0-day is not automatically magical or unstoppable, but it does remove one of the defender's biggest advantages, which is the chance to correct a problem before someone uses it in a real attack. One common misunderstanding is that an APT always uses zero-day exploits, but that is not true. Many serious campaigns succeed with very ordinary weaknesses, such as stolen passwords, weak remote access controls, poorly segmented networks, old software, or a convincing phishing message that tricks one employee. What makes the campaign dangerous is not always the novelty of the first entry point, but the discipline behind everything that follows. An attacker may begin with a simple email attachment, then quietly collect credentials, identify important servers, study user behavior, and move towards systems that contain valuable records or support important business processes. In other words, advanced attackers often win by combining basic weaknesses in a smart sequence rather than relying on one spectacular technical breakthrough. That sequence is easier to understand when you think of an attack campaign as a chain of activities instead of a single moment of compromise. An attacker first performs reconnaissance, learning about the target's people, technology, vendors, internet-facing services, and daily rhythms. After that comes initial access, which may happen through email, web applications, trusted relationships, remote services, or a vulnerable device. Once inside, the attacker tries to establish persistence so they can come back later, then escalates privilege, explores the environment, and moves laterally toward more valuable assets. The campaign usually ends with some form of objective, such as stealing data, manipulating information, sabotaging operations, or simply remaining hidden for future use, and every stage gives auditors and defenders different clues to look for. Persistence is one of the most important parts of understanding APT behavior, because it explains why these attacks can survive longer than organizations expect. Attackers do not want access that lasts only until the next reboot or the next help desk ticket. They often create multiple ways back in, such as hidden accounts, altered startup behavior, abused administrative tools, or changes that blend into routine operations. If one path is closed, another may remain open, and that is why incident response teams sometimes believe they solved the problem when they really removed only one symptom. From an audit perspective, this is a lesson in depth, because effective security does not depend on finding one infected machine, but on understanding whether controls can detect, contain, and fully remove long-term unauthorized access. Stealth is another defining feature, and it helps explain why these campaigns can remain active without immediate discovery. Attackers who want long-term access usually avoid noisy actions that create obvious disruption unless disruption is their goal. They may limit how much data they move at one time, schedule activity during normal business hours, use legitimate administration tools already present in the environment, or communicate through channels that resemble ordinary network traffic. This makes detection harder because many organizations are better at spotting dramatic failures than subtle misuse of trusted systems. It also shows why monitoring must focus not only on known bad files, but on abnormal behavior, unusual patterns of access, unexpected privilege use, and activity that does not fit the normal role of a user or device. When people hear about zero-day exploits, they sometimes imagine a random flaw that instantly destroys an entire company, but the reality is usually more structured. A software vulnerability is simply a weakness in design, coding, configuration, or implementation that creates an unintended path for misuse. An exploit is the method used to take advantage of that weakness in a practical way. If the weakness is unknown or not yet corrected when the exploit appears in the wild, defenders lose the comfort of established guidance and tested fixes. That said, strong security architecture still matters, because even when a specific weakness is new, controls such as segmentation, least privilege, application isolation, logging, and rapid response can limit how far the attacker moves after the first compromise. A helpful way to picture the difference is to imagine a building with a door flaw that the owner has not discovered yet. A zero-day is like a burglar finding that flaw before the building manager even knows the door can fail under certain conditions. An APT is more like a patient burglary crew that studies the building, learns guard routines, copies keys, maps interior rooms, and keeps a hidden entrance available for future visits. Sometimes the crew uses the unknown door flaw, and sometimes it does not need to, because an employee leaves a trusted entrance open or carries a badge that can be copied. The lesson is that unknown vulnerabilities matter a great deal, but determined attackers often succeed because organizations rely too heavily on one line of defense instead of assuming that eventually some control will fail. For beginners, it is also important to understand why certain organizations are more likely to face these threats. Attackers do not usually spend months on a target unless the target is worth the effort. Governments, critical infrastructure providers, financial institutions, healthcare entities, defense contractors, research organizations, major manufacturers, and large technology firms often hold data or capabilities that are strategically valuable. In some cases, the goal is money, but in other cases, the goal is competitive advantage, espionage, political influence, disruption, or future leverage during a conflict. A CISA candidate should recognize that risk is not based only on company size, because a smaller organization can become a target if it supports a larger one through software, logistics, cloud services, maintenance, or trusted network connections. This leads naturally to the idea of third-party and supply chain risk, which has become one of the most important parts of modern attack strategy. Instead of attacking the final target directly, a capable group may compromise a vendor, software provider, managed service firm, or other trusted partner that already has access into many environments. That approach can be efficient because one compromise may create a pathway to dozens or hundreds of organizations. It also complicates assurance, because a company may have strong internal controls and still be exposed through inherited trust relationships. For audit work, this means governance over vendors, contract expectations, update validation, access review, and continuous monitoring are not administrative extras, but essential parts of reducing exposure to advanced campaigns that deliberately look for the weakest connected link. Another important point is that advanced attacks are not purely technical problems. Human behavior, process quality, and leadership decisions often determine how successful the attacker becomes after the first foothold. If users are trained poorly, if privilege approvals are casual, if critical systems are poorly inventoried, or if alert reviews are inconsistent, then the attacker finds room to expand. Likewise, when executives treat patching, segmentation, logging, and testing as optional costs rather than core business safeguards, the organization creates conditions where a skilled adversary can operate longer before anyone reacts. For students, this is a reminder that security is never just about software weaknesses, because management discipline, policy enforcement, and organizational clarity often decide whether a technical event becomes a limited incident or a full business crisis. From the perspective of auditing and assurance, the key question is not whether an organization can promise that no APT or zero-day event will ever happen. No honest security team can make that promise, because new weaknesses and determined adversaries will always exist. The real question is whether the organization has built a control environment that reduces likelihood, limits impact, and improves the speed and quality of detection and response. Auditors therefore examine matters such as vulnerability management, access control, network segmentation, change management, threat monitoring, incident response readiness, backup integrity, third-party oversight, and governance reporting. Each of those areas contributes to resilience, and together they show whether the organization is prepared to absorb a sophisticated attack without losing control of its critical operations. Detection is especially challenging in this space because defenders are often searching for small indicators spread across many systems rather than one obvious alarm. A single unusual login, one unexpected process, or a small transfer of data may not seem serious by itself. When those events are connected over time, however, they can reveal a campaign that is quietly progressing toward a much larger objective. Mature security programs improve their chances by collecting reliable logs, correlating events, reviewing anomalies, and practicing investigation workflows before a real crisis begins. An auditor does not need to become a hands-on investigator to appreciate this, but should understand that monitoring quality depends on visibility, context, staffing, escalation discipline, and the ability to distinguish normal variation from suspicious behavior. Response strategy also changes when dealing with advanced attackers, because rushing in without a plan can make the situation worse. If defenders immediately block one visible sign of compromise without understanding the broader campaign, they may alert the attacker while leaving hidden access paths intact. On the other hand, waiting too long can give the attacker more time to steal data, alter systems, or spread deeper into critical environments. Effective response balances urgency with discipline by preserving evidence, identifying scope, coordinating technical and business stakeholders, and prioritizing containment actions that reduce harm while supporting a complete investigation. This matters greatly in a CISA context because assurance work often evaluates not only whether plans exist on paper, but whether the organization can make sound decisions under pressure when information is incomplete and the risks are changing hour by hour. By the time you step back from all of this, the picture becomes much clearer. APTs represent patient, capable, goal-driven campaigns that try to stay inside an environment long enough to achieve meaningful objectives, while zero-day exploits represent a dangerous timing advantage built around weaknesses the defender has not yet addressed. Sometimes they appear together, and sometimes the attacker succeeds with far more ordinary methods, which is exactly why organizations need layered controls, good governance, strong visibility, and practiced response capabilities. For a new learner, the most important takeaway is that advanced attacks are rarely about one dramatic moment and much more often about a chain of quiet decisions, missed signals, and control gaps that accumulate over time. That way of thinking will help you not only remember the exam concepts, but also understand why modern auditing must evaluate resilience across people, process, technology, and oversight rather than treating cyber threats as isolated technical events.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.